asking for what you want, I think, is just maybe one of the most important things you can do in this business, no matter what your role is.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Corbin-Westphal, a Broadway music director, conductor, voice coach, and tenured professor in the musical theater department at the University of Michigan.
And I'm Chelsea Wilson, a performer turned voice teacher to Broadway stars and vocal coach on Broadway productions like The Phantom of the Opera, School of Rock, and more.
Here on the Broadway Vocal Coach podcast, you can expect real talk about the business, practical advice, and constant encouragement.
We believe there's space for every artist in this industry. All you need is the right support, so consider us your two-woman hype team. Welcome to the Broadway Vocal Coach podcast, where we help musical theater performers get unstuck and take the next step in their careers. Today on the Broadway Vocal Coach podcast, we are joined by not one, but two amazing guests for an episode about the development of a new musical, the magic of collaboration, and how to take charge of your career and make things happen. Our first guest is Madeline Myers. Madeline is a composer and lyricist for musical theater in New York City. Her musicals include the upcoming Double Helix, Flatbush Avenue, which was a UNC Greensboro commission in 2021, The Devil's Apprentice, which had a world premiere in Copenhagen, Denmark, and Masterpiece, an O'Neill Musical Theater Conference semi-finalist. She was named to the 2022 Broadway Women's Fund Women to Watch on Broadway list and has received numerous accolades for her writing. When not writing musicals, Madeline enjoys reading, walking in Central Park, and volunteering. She's an active volunteer with Central Synagogue's Unhoused Breakfast program and the founder of a 2020 voter registration census count initiative for the New York unhoused community. Madeline sits on the alumni board of the Vanderbilt University Ingram Scholarship Program, of which she is a proud alumna. And fun fact, she is an original member of the music department of the Broadway production of Hamilton. Our second guest is Samantha Massell. Samantha is a New York-based actress and singer who has appeared on Broadway, on television, in movies, and more. She was last seen on Broadway as Hoddle in the acclaimed revival of Fiddler on the Roof. On the small screen, Samantha has recurred on Dynasty, Mr. Mercedes, and Chicago Fire, and has guest starred on NCIS New Orleans, The Good Fight, and Elementary. Samantha has originated starring roles in many world premiere musicals, including the lauded revisal of Stephen Schwartz and Charles Strauss's Rags at the Goodspeed Opera, The Flamingo Kid at Hartford Stage, and Disney's The Hunchback of Notre Dame at La Jolla Playhouse and Paper Mill Playhouse. She will next be seen as starring as Rosalind Franklin in the world premiere of Double Helix. A native New Yorker, Samantha made her Broadway debut at age 12 in Baz Luhrmann's production of Puccini's La Bohème. She holds a BFA in musical theater from the University of Michigan. Together, they are the writer and star of a brand new musical, Double Helix, which you'll hear about. It's about to get its world premiere production this summer at Bay Street Theater in Sag Harbor. Double Helix tells the forgotten story of Rosalind Franklin, a Jewish woman who was instrumental in the race to discover DNA in the 1950s. In the mid-20th century, the race to find the structure of DNA grips the scientific community. One brilliant young scientist, Rosalind Franklin, will stop at nothing to uncover one of life's great mysteries, encountering misogyny, anti-Semitism, and deception on her path to discovery. As Rosalind Franklin struggles to sacrifice what makes her human in order to discover what makes us human, Double Helix asks, what is life, and what does it truly mean to live?
Find an explanation, a total explanation. The mountains make me want to make my life amount to something, make my time count for something. I'm not interested in wasting time, I'm chasing time, I'm facing time, I'm racing time.
I'm so excited for you all to hear this interview with Madeline and Sam, so let's get right to it. Hello, you two, and welcome to the podcast. I want to first welcome Madeline Myers. Thank you so much for being here.
Chelsea, Cynthia, we're so thrilled to be here. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. And Samantha Massell, thank you for joining us.
Hi, guys. Thank you for having us. We're thrilled to be here.
What a party. This is truly my dream come true. I am so pumped to be talking to you guys today because I have always wanted to know the behind the scenes of how a new musical gets off the ground and into the world. And you two are right in the middle of this creation process. Or should I say, well, who knows, beginning, middle, end. It's like one of these eternal processes, which I know we're going to hear from you two about kind of how that's been and what's going on. Madeline and Sam, you are about to have a production of Double Helix at the Bay Street Theater in Long Island. Madeline, you are the composer and lyricist of the show, and Sam, you are starring in it. And I am so excited for audiences to hear this. I think it's a really special show. So we're going to dive into that conversation today and kind of hear how the sausage gets made. Is that a awful expression?
No, it's also explicitly in Hamilton.
It is in Hamilton. It's in the
So
room
every
where
time
it
I hear
happens.
that now, I'm like, oh wow, musical theater quote.
Listen, if it's good enough for Aaron Burr and
Okay,
Alexander
great.
Hamilton, it is good enough for us.
If it's good enough for Lin-Manuel
That's
Miranda,
right,
it's good enough
Sam.
for us.
Yes.
Perfect. I love to hear that. Well, then let's dive in, because that actually brings me to Madeline. I want to hear from your perspective. Tell us about your background and how you started composing music.
Well, I grew up in a really small town in the northwest corner of Georgia, and I really didn't have any kind of arts in my community or, no cultural institutions, nothing like that. And so there are kind of three big things that when I look back and I feel like how I started composing music that got me into writing. So one of them was that my town, again, did not have a lot of cultural institutions, but it did have a library. And my parents would take my sister and me to the library. We had a library card, and I kind of fell in love with books, and books are still a really huge part of my life. But I bring it up in the context of writing because I think what a love of reading did was I fell in love with story. And that's how I kind of feel like that's one big way that I got into writing was through my love of stories, which started by reading. The other thing was I trained as a classical pianist growing up. I took piano lessons, and it was kind of when I was in middle school that I started writing these kind of angsty middle school girl pop songs. And I realized that I liked how my brain felt when I was creating something. I liked how my brain felt in those moments more so than I did when I was interpreting something that someone else had written. And then the third big thing was that my mom's aunt lived in New York City, and she would send my sister and me, for every gift-giving occasion, a subscription to Highlights for Kids and these old MGM movie musicals. And so I had never seen a Broadway show. I'd never probably seen live theater of any kind, but I grew up watching these old MGM movie musicals. So Singing in the Rain and Easter Parade and Oklahoma and South Pacific and My Fair Lady and every kind of golden age musical that was recorded and made into a movie, I watched. So it was really kind of those three things that as I got older, I realized my love of all these things, of story, of music, kind of came together in musical theater. And so I went to college for writing classical art music, contemporary art music, but my love has always been for musicals and for musical stories.
That sounds like a recipe for creative genius. And also, I aspire to be that aunt. Like, that is like the most fabulous moment I've ever heard. Like, I absolutely want to be that aunt for my nieces and nephews.
Aunt Helen, yeah.
That's so cool.
Madeline, as a follow-up question to that, I'm so curious. I know you're a little bit of a different generation than I am, but I know that the composition world is still somewhat heavily male dominated, and certainly 10, 20 years ago, extremely male dominated. And I'm just so curious, was there ever a time when you thought women don't compose, or were women composers on your radar? Was that ever anything that inhibited you in any way, or was it always open and available to you? I'm just so curious.
Cynthia, I think that's a really thoughtful question. And it's something I think about a lot because I certainly did not see a lot of female composers. But at the same time, I don't think it was ever something I thought was not available to me. And I actually really attribute that to my parents. In a lot of ways, I feel like I take my own feminism for granted. I don't think I ever grew up thinking, this is something that's not available to me, or this is something that's not accessible to me. I think certainly as I've endeavored to do these things, I've experienced a lot of obstacles that are just inherent in this space because of culture and society and, all of those deep-seated things that I couldn't even begin to unpack. But I don't think I ever thought this was something I couldn't do. And now I look back and there aren't that many female composers who have had the kind of commercial success on Broadway that I would hope to have one day with my work.
I mean, even the major that you had in college is so fascinating to me. I don't know that I even would have known that was a thing back when I was coming up to college. So I love that that's what you majored in. It's so cool.
Yes. And, I had this conservatory-like experience because I was in a music school at Vanderbilt and I was in the composition program. And of course, there's this huge, and Cynthia, maybe this is something you've experienced in your work, this kind of huge divide between classical music and musical theater. And the high art classical music people look down on musical theater. And I always wanted to write musicals, and all my professors knew that. And I was writing contemporary art music. I was writing crazy string quartets that were very avant-garde and high art, capital H, capital A, and very, very intellectual and intelligent. But, my heart was always in musicals. And I think it's interesting because a lot of people hear my music and they think of it as very art music influenced because it is chromatic. And at the same time, I don't think it even remotely resembles what I think of as contemporary art music. It feels to me very, very theatrical.
Mm-hmm.
I do agree. So, Madeline, you somehow make your way to New York City. You do move beyond the contemporary art music world, and you find yourself in the original music team of Hamilton. Tell me a little bit about that experience and also some of these early experiences working in New York and dipping your toes into the true professional musical theater scene.
Well, I think I'm just the luckiest person on the planet that I somehow got to work in the music department of the original Broadway company of Hamilton. And I'm not kidding when I say it changed my life. It changed my life. It was just the most amazing thing to be in that room, to watch a musical that has had so much impact and has touched the lives of so many people come to life, and to watch really the minds who were behind the table making that show. And specifically, Lin-Manuel Miranda, Tommy Kail, Andy Blankenbuehler, and then my boss, Alex Lacamoire, who has been so generous to me in my career. He has given me, so many notes on Double Helix and so much smart feedback. He has been a champion for my career and for my work and of this show specifically. And I'm just really grateful that I got to be a fly on the wall, and I got to learn and got to see people who I admire so much working at their craft and working to put this show up. Yeah, sometimes I have to pinch myself. I can't even believe that it really happened and that I got to be a part of it. And I learned so much. I mean, I feel like I just got a PhD in how to make a musical just by being the music assistant on this show. And to be clear, my role, people ask me what I did, and I'm like, I cannot stress enough how low on the ladder I was. I was like, I'm not even sure people would know my name in a lot of cases, because that is how low on the ladder I was. But I was lucky to be there at all, and I tried to soak it up, and I tried to learn so much. And I think after that experience, it was so impactful on me in so many ways. But one of them was, and Sam has heard me tell this story probably many, many times, but on opening night, I made myself a promise that the next time my name would appear in a Broadway playbill, it would be as composer and lyricist, and it would not be as a music assistant. And I kind of decided and made this promise to myself, and it's been the easiest promise I've ever made and kept, which is I didn't want to work on other people's shows anymore. And I've been kind of a music assistant on a lot of different shows, certainly, some amazing things. And Hamilton obviously was kind of, the cream of the crop. But that was kind of when I decided I really had to put my career first. And so that was a very pivotal moment for me.
Can I just reflect back? I love that after having worked on a show like Hamilton, and Alex is an old friend, and he's amazing.
There's no one better. There's just no one better.
There's no one better.
No.
Yeah.
And he's fabulous.
Sam has worked with him as well.
Love that working
He's
in a
the
room
best.
with him and with the rest of the team, that you came away from that experience thinking, I can do this. I can be the one composing. I can be the one at the helm, rather than thinking, oh my gosh, I will never be as amazing. I will never be able, I love that you went in the direction of, yeah, I can do that. And I'm going to make sure the next time that it happens, it's going to be me at the helm. I love that.
Thank you for reflecting that back, Cynthia, because that's something Sam and I have talked a lot about in this process of collaborating together and bringing the show to life is, it's our turn. We have something to say. We have been involved in so many different processes, and Sam has such a kind of amazing career and a rich history, growing up in New York and all the work she's done and so many new works that she's developed. And we just really feel like, this is our time. Maybe my favorite musical is Merrily We Roll Along, because it's about the two best things in the world, musicals and friendship. And the song Our Time has a lot of significance to me. And I think a lot about how I want to do things when it is my time to do things. And, Sam and I are about to start this rehearsal process on Monday. And I think a lot about the kind of room that I want to have. And you know what? Sam and I are the people in charge, and we're going to do things the way that we want to do them. And we're going to, lead with kindness and humanity and professionalism. And, you hear all these stories about tempers and, all these crazy Broadway stories, and that's all good and well. And that's not us. And we're going to do things differently, and it's our turn to do it. So I'm very proud of that. And we'll look forward to having that experience.
I also just want to say, as not coming from just to endorse what Madeline has said, to make that kind of promise to yourself takes a lot of chutzpah, first of all.
Yeah.
But second of all, as an outside observer to Madeline's work for many years, other than this collaborative process, I just want to say out loud to anyone listening that Madeline's got the goods to back it up. And I think what Madeline is writing is so extraordinary and earth-shattering and genre reinventing. And I just wanted to make sure that was heard, because I think your work is extraordinary.
Thank you, Sam.
I feel very lucky to be a tiny part of this piece of it.
The feeling is obviously incredibly mutual. And now the podcast has devolved into Sam and me being like, no, I love you more. No, I love you more. No, I love you more.
Now it's my turn to say that I love you more, because I want to share this quick story of the first time I ever heard any music from Double Helix and the first time me and Madeline met. And then I want to hear kind of about how this show came to be. But Madeline, you started taking voice lessons from me.
That's right.
In what year was it? 2018, 2019
yes,
maybe?
2018 or 2019.
Around that time. And you were like, I'm a composer, I'm a pianist. I just want to be able to sing my music a little more confidently.
Wait, I have to interject and say Madeline was looking for a voice teacher, and I said you should go to Chelsea.
That is true. Sam did Yenta. Yes, Sam did Yenta.
I'm the Yenta.
Sam did Yenta this whole thing. That's exactly right. Yes. Thank you, Sam. That's an important part of this story, of the narrative is, yes, Sam Yented this.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, thank you. And around that time, you started bringing in pieces from this seed of an idea, this story about Rosalind Franklin and the discovery of DNA. And you would come in and you would play me the music in our lessons. And I was like, I have a front row seat to the inception of this idea, the inception of this music. And it was stunning. Exactly what Sam said. I really do think that it's beautiful. It's music we haven't heard on Broadway in years. And I'm so excited for audiences to hear it. So with that, Madeline, and then I'm going to turn some time to Sam, because I want to hear about your collaboration and all of this. But Madeline, tell us how you came to this idea. You're writing a completely new musical. It's based on a real life story, but it's not based on previous source material. What kind of challenges are you facing writing the lyrics, the music, and the book? AKA, you are a superhuman. How are you doing this, and how did this come to be?
Oh my goodness, hardly. I do not feel like a superhuman in the slightest. Well, so Double Helix is the story of the scientist Rosalind Franklin, who was this British Jewish scientist working at King's College in London in the early 1950s. And as soon as I read her story and kind of learned about this woman and who she was, the hair on my neck stood up. I feel like my heart stopped. Just everything in me responded to this woman and who she was. And I felt that her story was uniquely mine to tell, and that it had to be musicalized. It had to be sung. It felt so emotional and rich and explosive and daring. And it felt like it had to be a musical story.
Did I find the structure? Did I find much more? Did I get to taste my life, asking what is life? Did I use my time to discover life? And what is life? Just a moment if you're lucky. An extraordinary moment. One quick turn at finding eternity.
There have been so many challenges along the way. One of them being that it is a real life story. This, is based on something, a real person, something that happened in history. But, my job is not to be a biographer or, a historian. My job is to be a musical dramatist. And so that has kind of been the grounding thing, I think, in the actual creation of the story itself is, maybe this is what actually happened in history, but what's the most emotionally compelling way to represent this in a musical? And, I think one of the things that has made the process easier is knowing who you're writing for. So in this case, I've known Sam for many, many years and had gotten to know her work and just really admired, what she was doing. I thought she just had this instrument that was completely unmatched by anyone I had ever heard. She has just the most extraordinary voice and just the most extraordinary craft as a storyteller. And then she also seemed to kind of possess these qualities that felt very Rosalind-like to me. She had a chutzpah to her. She had a real grit to her. She kind of had this steel and this elegance that felt just so of Rosalind's world. And as I started to think about who Rosalind was and who was the person to embody her and what does Rosalind sound like and how does she behave and how does she move, I began writing it for Samantha. I felt that Samantha was really the person to create this role. And she's been the most generous collaborator, workshopping material really from day one. And I'm eager to hear, Sam's perspective and take on all this. But as many challenges as the process has contained, I will say collaborating with Sam and writing this role for her has been just the most incredible gift. And I just am walking on air when I think about the people that are going to get to see this performance. And I am not kidding when I say there will only be your life before and your life after seeing Sam in this role. This is the most serious thing I've ever said in my life. I believe it in my bones. And mostly I'm just so excited for the world to see this performance and to see, Sam bring this incredible woman's story to life.
That's very generous, Madeline. And I feel the same about people getting to see this show and hear this score. To piggyback off that, and I know the question wasn't directed at me, but Madeline and I were friends and had become friendlier. We'd collaborated on some demos together of other shows that she was working on. We were connected actually through another Michigan grad who's writing musicals, Danny Abosh, who's terrific. And Madeline and I randomly, she was working on a show in Europe in summer of 2018 that she was commissioned to do in Copenhagen. And I was going abroad for 2 weeks on a trip. And I was like, do you want to meet up and take a road trip? And we did. And I remember just being in the car with her. And she said, I was like, what you working on? And we were just like driving around the Faroe Islands. If you've never heard of them, worth a Google. Having the best 4 days of our lives. I was like, what you working on? And she was like, I'm working on this new show. And she starts telling me the story of Rosalind Franklin. I'd never heard of this woman before. And I also I suddenly was like, oh my God, because there are so many qualities about this woman now that I know more that I also personally identify with in myself. It just feels in many ways very square peg, square hole. Anyway, we're driving and she looks at me and she goes, it's you. She's like, it's you. I know it's you, in her very Madeline way. And I remember being like, oh my God, how cool. And at the same time being like, yeah, right. Because I think in this business, we hear so much. I mean, the amount of people who have said, oh, I'll call you for this, or you're doing this, or you're getting the offer for, it doesn't come through. This is just such a common thing. And I was like, I just sort of grain of salt, got excited. But for the rest of that year, I remember we had dinners or whatever. We would be like, what's the first scene of the show? We would just be dreaming and scheming and imagining and what we wished and all of these things. And then it actually started to come true, which is so rare for a dream in this business to come true the way that this has come true. And the loyalty I know that we feel for each other, also that we've really transcended best friendship. We are literally family at this point.
It's true.
And I remember we did our first ever public performance of anything from the show, a song that has since been cut. And Chelsea was there at the York Theater. Do you remember this? I think it was March or April of 2019. And it started to become clear that this was actually going to be mine and a thing that we would get to share and collaborate on. And I feel very lucky as an actor and as a person to get to be a part of this in any way. Because I think this story is extraordinary. This role is extraordinary. This group of people, this team is so special. And how rare in this business to have something like this come along that you're just like, I am it. Like I feel that in my bones. Like I feel emotional even just talking about it. But as auditions have come up in this past year, I've literally been like, pass. Like nothing is going to take me out of this creative process. Nothing. To me, there is nothing that's more important artistically than fulfilling the rest of this journey, because I just love it so much. And I love Madeline so much, and this blah, 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 blah.
Sam, I want to ask you a follow-up question about that. You are no stranger to new works. You have worked on plenty of new shows, revisals of shows. You made your Broadway debut as a young child in a new work. Tell us about what has been your experience with new shows, developing new works, and what inspires you about these projects and what's challenging about them, and how might this be different?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm hearing Madeline talk about her childhood. It's so funny because I think in many ways we are so similar, but we had very opposite experiences. Because I grew up in New York City. I was a child actor. When I was 8 years old, I asked my mom for an agent, and she was like, "Pardon me, what? You want a what?" I did a Broadway show when I was a kid, and I was auditioning before I went to college. I was just sort of always had one toe in either world. And I grew up a musical theater, certified freak. So I've always had a big passion and interest in the actual work and the history, as opposed to just my job as an actor in executing someone else's vision. I was absolutely that kid who was at the Lincoln Center Library once a week, putting cast recordings in iTunes, which was a brand new thing, just so I could have them all and listen to them all and memorize them all, because I was special. So that's sort of, I think, a lot of the foundation that has attracted me so much to new work. It's definitely my favorite thing to work on. I would rather go out of town to do a new show than probably anything else. Something that I feel clearer on in terms of what attracts me to something as an artist now is that collaboration. That is the kind of thing that's like pollen. If I'm a bee, I'm like, deal me in. Getting to have that seat at the table as a participant in the creation of a story. And I'm not saying I'm writing it, I'm not stepping where I shouldn't be, but just being able to be a part of those conversations and have an active voice in the room is the thing for me that feels the most special about all of those new works, and experiencing that in different ways with different teams and all of that stuff. I mean, all of these projects, when I was doing Rags Out of Town at Goodspeed, that was a really interesting experience because we had a new book writer who had completely reshaped it, and Stephen Schwartz is out there rewriting songs, and they're trying to completely reframe the story. And I remember there's one moment where a scene wasn't working, and me and another actress piped up and we were like, what if we just reverse these 2 lines? And that's in the book now. That is how the show is licensed out. And it feels very exciting to get to be a part of the creation of that story in that small way, because we are standing up there in the shoes of these characters. And sometimes we can feel and connect with things from a different perspective. And it's so gratifying and exciting to be in rooms of other artists who are interested in that, who want to share in that. And that's something that I have found in spades with Madeline and Scott and Patrick, our music director, Patrick Sulkin. And that's something I really, really treasure and will never take for granted.
Sam, what you were saying about how the, actor suggested switching the 2 lines and now it's a part of, the show that's being licensed, it kind of made me think of what you were saying, Chelsea, at the very beginning of this conversation, where you're saying, are you in the beginning, the middle, the end, where are you in the process? And it makes me think how, there's this adage about musicals, which is you don't write a musical, you rewrite a musical, and you're never finished writing your musical. They just take it away from you on opening night. I think so much about how new works behave and just how inherently collaborative they have to be. I hope we're at the very beginning of this process. I really think that Bay Street and this world premiere production that Double Helix is about to have is just the beginning, and that we're really just getting started. But that's what it made me think of when you said that, Sam.
There's this other element of, I teach a lot on the side, and this is an element I pass along a lot to my students of, there's this great Philip Seymour Hoffman quote where somebody was like, what is acting to you? And he's like, I like to find the chaos within the structure. And I think the process that we're about to enter in right now, this is like how I think about acting all the time, is like, what is the structure of this scene, right? What is the structure of this song? Where do I start? Where do I end? What are my events that are happening on my way to, like, how is the story changing? How is the relationship changing? Like, what is that process, right? And now we're about to walk into a room of other voices, other actors and other collaborators. And it's going to be so exciting. And all of a sudden we are going to be slapped in the face in the best possible way with chaos. Do you know what I mean? Like everything that I've figured out or thought I figured out in my 4 years of dreaming, imagining, and workshopping this show, now I'm going to meet an actor who's going to deliver a line to me a different way. That's my chaos. And that's so exciting to me. Like that sense of spontaneity that is suddenly going to leap forth. So getting to share that with the company as well that type of collaboration feels really exciting. And with this team, collaboration for me on these new works, this is the stuff that makes me just so excited and really thrilled to be a part of this musical theater community.
And along those lines, Sam, I actually think it's really important to, something that I think is a value of mine is, I think it's important for every person in the process to feel some sort of ownership in the process and to see their fingerprints on it. And I've certainly been in processes where there's a lot of clinging to the material and there's not a lot of generosity and there's not a lot of opening the door for people to come in and put their own stamp on it. But I actually think that's a totally backwards way of making theater. I think the more you let people in, the more you get out of the material. And I think that's really important.
We're here to execute someone else's vision, but we're also participants in that. You know what I mean? It's not an idea factory. That's really important just to state in the legalese of that. But it is a collaboration. Blood, sweat, and tears. Blood, sweat, and tears. We poured them all into a cauldron and stirred it up.
This is what you've got. Madeline and Sam, you guys are about to walk into a rehearsal process starting on Monday. Congratulations for the first ever production of Double Helix, running this May and June at Bay Street Theater in Long Island. Tell me and tell our listeners, folks who might not know or have had the opportunity to be part of a creation process of a new musical, how do you get to this point? You've already alluded, Sam, it's been 4 years of dreaming, and Madeline, you've been rewriting the musical for 4 years. But how do you get something from off the page to finding collaborators? Like you said, you've got a music director and a director attached. You're getting producers attached at this point. Walk us through, and you can keep it as simple as you'd like, but walk us through what is that process like? Because I have a feeling folks might not realize that there's so much more business in the back end than sitting down at the piano and just writing the show, right? That's the kind of the romantic version of writing a musical, I imagine, but there's so much more that goes on behind the scenes. So what's that been like?
Well, Chelsea, there sure is.
There sure is. I think, Chelsea, no, it's so interesting what you say about the business, because here's the thing. It is a business and a musical is a product. And I'm an entrepreneur. That's the reality of it. And the other side is that there is no clear path for getting your show produced. There just is not. You could ask 10 writers how their show got produced, you would get 10 different answers. And so one side of that coin is, well, how liberating and exciting that there's no clear-cut path. That means anything can lead to your production, and that's correct. The other side is how incredibly daunting and intimidating and overwhelming because there is no clear-cut step or journey to take in order to get your show produced. That is also true. And I've experienced both of those things. I think a lot of ways that the show has moved forward have been through kind of unorthodox channels and thinking outside the box and that. And then, they're just, the reality is that there is no, here's how to produce your show or here's how to get it produced. To come back to the business side of things, something that I think about a lot, because the show, it is a product. And if you were an entrepreneur of any other thing, if you were developing a technology or a product or a service or whatever, you would have to make sure that the thing, the technology, the product, the service, the whatever, is exceptional and that people want to buy it and that people want to use it and that it works in the way that you intend for it to. And a musical is exactly the same way. What's different, of course, between a musical and, insert product here or insert technology here is that it takes a lot of time to develop it. And the only way to really see if it works is to stage it and get it on its feet in front of people. And there's an inordinate amount of resources that go into that. If you're like me, just kind of a one-woman operation over here trying to get your show on, just the actual bandwidth and labor and resources that is required to develop the show, to just develop the product and say, oh, is this any good? Does it make sense? Are we tracking a character and a story? And are we starting here and ending here? I mean, very basic nuts and bolts things. To me, it's absolutely wild when I think about just the inordinate amount of steps that it has taken to getting it just to a place where the product itself feels like something that makes sense as a piece of theater and is compelling and emotional and, works musically and works dramatically and theatrically. The other piece of that is, so if you do have something that you think works, how do you actually get it produced? Because the production is really for me anyway, the goal of my work is to get it produced, to get it in front of people and to get it in front of the most people possible. In the case of Double Helix specifically, the director of the show, Scott Schwartz, who has kind of been involved pretty much since day one and who has been kind of my collaborative partner in bringing this show to life, is the artistic director of a theater, and he believes in this show. He thinks it's so special. He knows that there is a big, big life ahead of it, and he wanted to program it at his theater. So we are very, very excited that this will be the first production. And beyond this production, stay tuned for more information, because we do hope to have some exciting things for people to hear about beyond this first production. But it's such a crazy process. I think every single day, I just don't even know how any shows get produced. It's just wild to me. It's crazy.
Looking to apply to college musical theater programs? If you're frustrated by the process already, here's the solution you've been waiting for. BVC Aspire is our 4-month college audition prep program for rising high school seniors or gap year folks. If that's you or your child, then this is where you need to be. And here's why it works. Aspire includes everything you need to successfully apply to college programs within a fixed yet flexible 4-month time period, June through September. It's a fixed price, so there's no surprise costs, and you get your applications in at the start of senior year, saving you months of stress and opening up time for all the other stuff you want and need to do. Registration is open now and doors close on May 15th. We have limited spots available for our 2023 program, and we're already at 75% capacity. So now is the time to act. Ready to get stressing over college audition prep off your plate? Schedule a free consult with us. Email hello@buavocalcoach.com or check the link in our show notes to book a call. Talk to you soon. I think what you said, Madeline, about there's no roadmap, there's no instruction manual, and I know from knowing the two of you that a lot of it has been, who do I know? Who can I call? Who do I think will believe in this show? Who might have someone to connect me to who might be the right person for this job that we're looking for, et cetera, et cetera. So can either of you speak to that and the importance of building a network and reaching out in ways that are, of course, helpful for your show, but also you're constantly building connections. Can you guys speak to that?
I know Sam will have a lot to say about that. The one quick thing I wanted to say is that, just in terms of the beating down doors and calling every person that you know and finding the people who believe in you, just to bring it back to Merrily We Roll Along again, I always feel like I'm just in the middle of my opening doors montage. These past 4 years is just, we are in the opening doors montage. But Sam, I know you have a lot to say about this.
No, I think that's actually a great visualization. I'm sure a lot of the people listening to this podcast are young actors, so I would say that this advice applies to that and likely all sorts of different things. Many moons ago, I was on a trip with my mom and I met this other mother-daughter couple, and the mom had been a former agent at William Morris and the daughter was a television writer. And we ended up spending 3 days with them. We had this whole mother-daughter thing going on, and they schooled me in how to career. This was just after I'd finished drags, and it's some great advice that I've taken with me everywhere. And it's, I mean, easier said than done, but it's email one person a day on behalf of your career. The worst thing that you're going to get back is no. The amount of jobs I've gotten or been in consideration for, or rooms that I've been in because I just sent out an email. Like when we were doing rags, I remember David Loud was our music supervisor, who is just the greatest and most sensational person. And I remember I was looking to get into more concert and symphony work. And I sent him a message and I was like, I hear you're doing lyrics and lyricists. I'm sure you already have a group. If not, I just want to throw my hat in the ring. This is something I'm really interested in. And I think I'm suited for it. And he was like, we're cast. Thank you so much. I'll keep you in mind. 2 weeks later, I got the job. So that's something like when I did Hunchback with Stephen Schwartz and Alan Menken and Scott Schwartz again out in La Jolla Playhouse and Paper Mill. After Fiddler, I'd heard that this rags revisal was circulating, and apparently like Jesse Mueller had done a reading. And I emailed Stephen Schwartz. I mean, I just worked with him on Hunchback, but he wasn't like my buddy. But I sent him an email and I was like, I think I'm right for this. And forgive me if this isn't kosher, but I'd like to throw my hat in the ring. And he said, oh, you know what? You're right. We're actually aging down the lead character. I'll set you up with an audition. I auditioned. I stayed later to meet the whole team and I got the job. I'm not saying this is like always the route to success. Many times it is not, but you never really know. And it's just earnest. Like, it's just like, hey, like, how can I participate? How can I throw my hat in the ring? Throw my hat in the ring is like one of my favorite little phrases. So that said, that's a philosophy I abide by. It's not something I'm doing like every hour of every day, trust me. But when something comes along, I generally don't hesitate. But for this show, I think I sort of alluded to this before. I think this type of role, this type of show, this to me in so many ways feels once in a lifetime for me as an actor and as my own business person. And then in terms of like the field and the art that I love at large, Madeline's work to me feels once in a lifetime. So suddenly I was just like, how can I help? How many more hands do you want on deck? Because like you can have my hands, you can have my feet, you can have my elbows, you can have whatever you want. So, I'm not producing the show in any means at all. But when we've been having readings or events, or you couldn't come to the reading, would you like to take a look at our video footage? I have reached out to my contacts, my people who I have relationships with, because why not? This is such a great representation of me and my work and what I want to see on Broadway, and something that I think would be an extraordinary opportunity for me and for my good friend. So why not? And I have to tell you, we've gotten a lot from it. So that is to me building that network, and Madeline and I she mentioned before wanting to keep a warm and positive room. Like, I think we're both warm and positive people. I don't think anyone's going to be like, wow, that self-serving witch. I think they'll be like, I'll take a look. I take it, leave it, take it with a grain of salt, follow it however it makes sense for you. But for me, that has been something that's been really informative and just sort of like a helpful little guiding light. And I think we've really applied it to the show, and it has paid us back tenfold. And I know that's a policy Madeline also subscribes to. So I don't take this as me like doing like, I'm doing all of this. I'm just a small piece of the puzzle, but it works.
I really believe in the power of asking for what you want. I just think I cannot even tell you the number of times where I have just simply asked for something that I've needed or that I've wanted. And I believe that the worst thing you can do is not ask. And I would encourage anyone listening, I'm not an actor, but asking for what you want, I think, is just maybe one of the most important things you can do in this business, no matter what your role is.
Completely agree. I am all for asking, because they can just say no. And then it's fine. I think we place so much. We think that if someone's going to say no, it comes attached with, and you're a horrible person for asking, and how dare you? And usually it's just like, no, not at this time. Thanks for asking. It means so little, So I always feel like just ask. There's just no reason not to.
Yeah. And I think it's important too. I mean, when we're talking about how the sausage gets made, I always looked to shows that were happening and had no idea how they were made, and just assumed that the magical, pixie dust of Broadway got sprinkled on them in some way. And, that's not been my experience. As Sam was saying, it's been a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. And I actually think that's important to tell people about, because I'm not interested in presenting this facade of like, look how easy this experience has been. I mean, part of it has been the really fighting for this show to be heard. Again, I think I have often thought that other shows had this easy experience. And listen, maybe they did, but I just think it's important to be honest about our process and our experience, because I want other people to know that that is one way of making it happen. And if it's a little like less sexy to you that we had to so scrappily fight for this, then like, I don't know. That's not who we are.
Sorry.
Exactly.
Yeah. This is part of our story. This is part of also like, I do think this is part of Rosalind's story.
For sure.
You know what I mean? She's a woman in a man's world. She's not doing the traditional female things. Like, and I will just say, like, as an actor, like, I get asked to do things all the time. And I often respond back with a very lovely and generous no. You know what I mean? But like, I'm never like, oh, dear 54 Below sings random pop artist, like, you jerks for reaching out to me.
Right.
Like, I would never, I don't respond that way. So I just can't imagine anybody else would. But I think the thesis of this to me is that when you believe in something, the way I think both of us believe in this, why not?
Sam, because you've done so many new works, I'm curious if you have advice for other folks who are trying to get into that space and do more works. And a follow-up question to that is, do you show up differently in a room of a new work versus a room of a show that is already in existence that we've seen before? And what advice could you give to other actors who are looking to enter into this space a little bit more?
Wow. First of all, I love this question. And as you're saying it, I'm like, do I have an answer for the back half of that? I'm not sure. Regarding dipping your toe into it, honestly, when I first graduated from college, that was something I was really thinking about, was how to connect with young writers, because I knew one day they'd be old writers. So I just tried to immerse myself as much as I could in that. You want a demo? Let me participate. I mean, my friend Danny, who I met at Michigan, Danny Abosh, was very instrumental in that for me. I sang for him. He became like my buddy, and he's a good pal of mine. He's also extraordinary. Please look him up. He introduced me to Madeline. I remember I was like, great, another writer. Never did I think we would end up here working with her and getting to sing her musical language. And when I talk to my students who are auditioning for college, something I always talk to when it comes to selecting rep is, I'm sure you can do lots of different things, but what do we want to lead with, right? What I lead with, what me, Samantha Massell, like what I want to lead with, my number one thing is in many ways what Madeline writes. Or it's her aesthetic, her artistic aesthetic. So I remember when I got introduced to her as a young writer, her aesthetic, I suddenly was like, oh, I do this. Like this is a fit. And a couple years later after I met her, after Fiddler closed, I was prepping a solo show at 54 Below where I had a great time and also lost 10 years off my life. But I had this idea to write a song for the show based on this children's book called Girls Can Be Anything. I don't know if you grew up with this. I did. It was like very instrumental to my childhood. It's about this little girl, Marina, and like the boy in her class is like, you can't be this stuff. And she's like, yes, I can. And so I reached out to Madeline, and I knew her. We had done some stuff, but we were not besties. And I was like, would you be interested? I was like, let's open up this other level of collaboration. You know, Madeline has introduced me to other writers. When I was in my early 20s, there was a thing, it's still around, but it was very preeminent, called the Musical Theater Factory. I was like, how can I get on the board? You want help planning your Joe's Pub thing? Like, I'll write an email. Just getting to participate like that. Somebody else recently who I know peripherally commented on someone's Facebook post, congratulating them for being the show. And I commented back, I'd met them before. He messaged me, I'm recording a demo for him in June. It's not like, I'm not being sneaky. I just want to be clear, but I'm just like, this is the type of work I want to be doing. If you're looking for a singer, deal me in. I want to expose myself to all different types of things. It's better preparation for me as an artist auditioning for different types of things. And that's getting to create in the studio or in a 29-hour reading. That's the fun stuff. So yeah, I guess that's my answer. It's just like, is to network and just to be out there. Sing at 54 Below. If somebody wants you to do their thing, say yes. And then in regards to how I enter a room, gosh, to be fair, I haven't entered a room of a show that's already written in quite some time. I have done a bunch of on-screen work recently on television, which is not quite the same thing, but in many ways you're walking into a well-oiled machine and you're just a cog in the wheel, which is not dissimilar. Like I did 6 episodes on the CW reboot of Dynasty last year, and just like finding your place in how they tell their story and how they work their thing and It's not dissimilar, I think, to like mounting a summer stock production somewhere where you got the structure. There's not as much room for the chaos, as I said earlier. But that said, when I am auditioning for theater that is not a new piece like that, I definitely am trying to bring my own self to it. I think as I've gotten older and trusted myself and believed that I was enough, like I think my interpretation, the me of your Marion Peru or the me of your blah, 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 is something that I feel really empowered by as opposed to scared of. It's something that I feel like I want to bring in the room and share with people as opposed to being like, I think they want this. I should do it this way. They must be searching for yada, yada, yada. I think that's also an industry trend, but it's also like something I feel personally trending within me that like, I'm proud of who I am. I like what I bring to the table. I have a feeling I'm going to do it right. It may not be your thing, but I like to bring myself. I think I've done that recently.
I love that. Yes. I think that's such good advice.
It's great advice, Sam.
Yeah. Even just as simple as just bringing yourself. It's kind of a radical idea, to be honest.
It is. And I think that's your currency. That's the only thing you have in this business is who you are and the things that make you different. And those are the things that make you special. I absolutely think that's true.
And I think that's the same thing is also true for Madeline. You know, it's something she and I have talked about behind the scenes because, you know, we talk about Double Helix all day, every day.
24/7.
We're in like the cult of Rosalind Franklin. I think what makes Madeline special is the way that Madeline is writing, is that it's not fill in the blank pop show or fill in the blank. It's not that same thing that we're hearing again and again and again. And I think we should lean into the things that make us unique, whether it is my bringing myself into the audition room or into the rehearsal room or whatever, and bringing yourself into the work that you're getting printed on the page. I think that's something I like to live by.
You just said something about Rosalind's story, and I want to end on this question. Rosalind is a Jewish woman in science in the 1940s. Is that right?
1950s.
50s. Well, she was there in the 1940s, but this story takes place in the early 50s.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What about her story specifically resonates with you, inspires you, and feels like it's important to tell right now?
So there are a lot of things about Rosalind's story that as soon as I read them just deeply moved me and really just kind of shook me to my core. You know, one is that we're both women, we're both Jewish, we're both about the same age, you know, at this time, that this kind of moment in Rosalind's life, the story, this specific moment that we're telling. But there were kind of more than just those surface things that really spoke to me. She was really ambitious and she really was daring. And for me, the biggest connection that I felt to this woman was that the way she felt about her work as a scientist is how I feel about my own work as a musical dramatist. And something that I say a lot about this show is that this show is a love story about a woman and her work. And to me, that's really what it is. And that's how I feel about my work too.
I think obviously she's Jewish, she's a woman, she's our age, all of those things that Madeline connects with, I connect to. But I think also just her tenacity, striving for the truth. I think there's so many things about this story to me that feel so, despite being technically, I guess, like a period piece, feels so contemporary to me. A woman not getting any credit. Anti-Semitism is on the rise. And it is just like, I feel like it's this thing that's like only half talked about. I don't really even know how to convey. And I also think we're all living, I don't know if I would say the wake because it's still going on, in a global pandemic. Something that Rosalind says a lot is science tells the truth. And that feels super relevant right now. But I think above all, she's so tenacious. She doesn't take no. She fights for what she knows is right. And she fights for her place. I feel connected to that in my personal life, in my life as a solo business person, artist. I feel connected to that, to Madeline. I think we feel so tethered to fighting for our place. I think we just both really believe that this show has a place in New York, and fighting for that. I mean, that to me, that feels like Rosalind fighting to be heard, fighting to be taken seriously. I love this woman. I love this story. I love this show. I really am so excited for people to see it. I just want to also highlight, I know you've been saying it's in Long Island. It's in the Hamptons. It's in Sag Harbor. Very she, great place to come see our show and spend $80 on a sandwich. And it's going to be It's going to be really special.
I have to laugh. I've never felt so small. Where the sky is near enough to touch if I just could reach. Kings feel so far away, so distant. Did I dream the whole ordeal? I have to wonder, was it real? Is it really possible to have mountains and craters much greater than anything an X-ray could measure? A sight so indescribable a photograph can't even capture it. Is it real if it's so small you can't even see it? Is it real if it's so big you can't even hold it? And is it real if it's a moment that passes by so fast you can't even be sure it's true? And despite what I've maintained, is it real if it is something that cannot be explained?
Samantha, Madeline, thank you so much for joining us today. I have really enjoyed this conversation about the behind the scenes of getting a new musical up and running, the collaboration between the two of you, and the amazing advice that you've given to our listeners, whether they're creatives creating their own new work, if they're actors. I just think I have learned so much, and I think you two are really inspiring to other folks in the business, and especially women in the business. I'm really excited for everyone to hear this episode.
Thank you. We're so thrilled.
And we wish you all the best
Thank you.
for the production.
Thank
We're so
you.
excited.
It meant so much to us to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And go Blue. Yeah, this was
And
so
cast
fun.
album, please. I'm putting it out there. We want a cast album to happen.
Cynthia, from your mouth to God's ears. Original Broadway cast. We're going to make it happen.
They heard. God heard.
Hold on, she's speaking to me now.
Thank you, guys. Thank you both. We'll see you later.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Tickets for the world premiere production of Double Helix at Bay Street Theater in Sag Harbor are now on sale at baystreet.org. The show runs from May 30th to June 18th, 2023. Catch it if you are in the New York area. I think you can tell from this episode, it is a special show that I hope has a life far beyond this production. If you want to connect with Samantha, you can find her on Instagram and Twitter at @SMassellSings and her website, samanthamassell.com. You can connect with Madeline on Instagram at Madeline S. Myers and her website, MadelineMyers.com. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a screenshot, tag us on Instagram at BWayVocalCoach, share this episode with a friend, and consider leaving us a review. And if you're ready to take your next step in this industry, but aren't entirely sure what that should be, then take our quiz. We'll strategize with you to outline a roadmap to your unique goals. Plus, from there, you can book a free consult with us. Visit BWayVocalCoach.com/take the quiz. We can't wait to hear your story and help you take the next step in your career. Thanks for listening.